The morning started like any other, quiet, methodical, and a little too still for a Thursday. I moved through my apartment with a kind of practiced efficiency that only comes from years of repetition. Coffee brewed while I packed my lunch. I watered the one surviving plant on the windowsill, checked the weather app, and mentally prepared for a day of grading sophomore essays on the Revolutionary War. Before stepping out the door, I opened the small wooden box on the top shelf of my closet. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, sat my father's bronze star. My fingers brushed over it gently, just for a moment. I didn't do this every morning, not exactly, but often enough. It grounded me. That medal wasn't just a symbol of military service. It was proof that someone in my bloodline had stood for something, died with something intact. My father had given it to me before he passed, whispering, "Keep it safe, Darlene. Not just the medal, what it means." And I had, or so I thought. School was uneventful, the kind of day where the copier jammed 3 times, and the coffee in the teacher's lounge tasted like someone reused old grounds. I was halfway through reviewing attendance when my phone vibrated against the metal drawer of my desk. Unknown number, local area code. I should have let it go to voicemail. "Ma'am, are you Darlene Ruth?" The voice was gravelly, clipped, like someone used to giving bad news and wanting to get it over with. "Yes," I answered, sitting up straighter. "Who's calling?" "Name's Frank DeMarco. I run DeMarco's Pawn Gold down on West Travis. Look, this is going to sound strange, but we had a military medal come in yesterday, a Bronze Star. The name on the back says Arthur Ruth. That mean anything to you?" My mouth went dry. I blinked once, twice, like I could erase the words from the air. "That's not possible," I said flatly. "I figured, thought you should know." Something about how it was presented, it just didn't sit right. He didn't have to say more. I was already grabbing my keys. I left school under the excuse of a family emergency and drove home in a fog of disbelief. Every red light felt like an accusation. My apartment door swung open before I even pulled the key from the lock. I headed straight for the closet, hands trembling. I opened the box. Empty. Just the impression in the velvet where the medal used to sit. No note, no explanation, no sound but the ticking of the wall clock and the whooshing of air from the vent overhead. Someone had gone through my things. Someone who knew what they were looking for. My fingers hovered above the empty box. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks or rifled drawers, which meant it was someone I trusted, or someone who had access. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? That a family heirloom went missing and I suspect, what, my mother? My brother? Instead, I drove, fast, reckless, straight to my mother's place on the east side of town. The house looked the same, overland roses by the fence, that same wind chime I always hated clinking by the porch, but something about it felt off, even before I knocked. Jolene answered the door in her usual way, smile already on, apron tied at her waist like she'd just finished wiping down a spotless counter. "Well, if it isn't my busy little bee," she said, stepping aside. "You want coffee?" I didn't sit. I didn't blink. "Where's Dad's medal?" Her smile wavered, just a hair. "What medal?" "The Bronze Star. The one he left me." "Oh," she said, as if I'd asked about a misplaced grocery list. "It's fine, honey. It's just in storage. I thought you wouldn't mind. It was taking up space and Colton needed room for his setup." "His what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You know, the mining thing, crypto. He's really on to something big this time. Has that little rig buzzing day and night now. He's convinced this is the breakthrough." I stared at her, trying to match the woman who raised me with the one casually admitting she moved a piece of my father's soul to make room for a digital dream. "And the medal?" "It's safe," she said, too fast. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I walked into the living room and noticed something else. Colton had my old surge protector plugged into the wall, the one with the scratched sticker from when I worked at the library. His tower of glowing tech pulsed beside the couch like a beacon of misplaced ambition. He wasn't home, just as well. I didn't trust myself to stay calm if I saw his face. I left without another word. Jolene didn't follow. Back home, I called the number from earlier. Frank answered on the second ring. "I need to see it," I said. "Come in first thing tomorrow. I'll hold it off the floor." "Who brought it in?" He hesitated. "Guy said he was family." Claimed it belonged to him. Seemed confident. "Did he say his name?" "Colton. Colton Avery." I closed my eyes. My voice dropped to a whisper. "He's not family. Not like that." There was a long pause. "You okay, ma'am?" "No." But I said, "Yes, thank you." When I hung up, I stared at the empty velvet box again. Funny how a piece of metal could hold the weight of a person, and how in the wrong hands it could vanish like smoke. You think your home is safe, until someone trades your father's honor for wires and blinking lights. Frank DeMarco's pawn shop sat between a payday loan place and a vape store, the kind of plaza you don't glance at twice unless you have a reason. I had mine. The drive there felt heavier than the last 2 hours of teaching combined. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow, like something had already been stolen that I hadn't quite accepted yet. Inside, the smell of worn leather, musty felt, and aged metal clung to the air. Frank looked exactly how you'd expect a man in his line of work to look. Bearded, faded tattoos, thick gold ring on his pinky. But when he saw me, something in his expression softened. Maybe he saw the weight I was carrying before I even said a word. "Miss Ruth?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded and gestured toward the counter. "I've got it in the back. Give me a minute." I waited by the glass display case full of tarnished watches and class rings. A neon sign flickered overhead, buzzing in a rhythm that didn't quite sync with the hum in my ears. Frank returned with a small box, the one I'd known since childhood. He opened it gently, like he understood he wasn't just showing me an item, but something far heavier. The metal lay there, pristine. No scratches, no dents. Still intact, even if everything else felt broken. "Still in excellent condition," Frank said quietly. "But it's what he said when he brought it in that got me." I looked up. Said it belonged to his stepdad, that he passed, told me nobody else really cared about it, that it was just collecting dust. I swallowed hard. "Did he give a name?" Frank tapped the intake sheet. "Colton Avery." I didn't react, at least not on the outside. Inside, something snapped, or maybe it was already cracked, and this was the final break. "I'm glad you called me," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Frank hesitated. "Pawn ticket says he got 2,300 ton." Said he needed the cash for some kind of tech equipment, looked me straight in the eye like it meant nothing. I nodded slowly, picked up the metal, and closed the box. "What do you do," I muttered, "when someone sells off a memory like it's just hardware?" Frank didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back at my mother's house later that day, everything looked normal, but the normalcy itself felt performative, too arranged. The cushions on the couch had been fluffed, a scented candle burned in the corner. For someone who rarely cleaned, she'd clearly made an effort. That made me suspicious. I stepped into the hallway leading to the bedrooms and stopped short. The photograph, Dad in uniform, standing stiff in front of the base flagpole, was gone. "Mom?" I called out, keeping my voice calm. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yeah?" "Where's the photo of Dad? The one in the hallway?" "Oh," she said, as if she'd forgotten. "I put it away." Thought it was time to refresh the space. Pictures get old, you know? Old pictures. Right. I smiled, forced, brief, and gone before she could respond. I made my way to the living room, every step making me angrier. Colton came through the back door not long after, balancing a new laptop box in one arm and a tangle of cords in the other. "Hey sis," he said like nothing had happened. "Big day today, just picked up the final parts for the rig." I said nothing, just watched him. He dropped the gear onto the table, then started setting it up like he was decorating a Christmas tree. Jolene stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, proud as if he'd just been accepted into Yale. Colton looked up at me and grinned. "Crypto's the future, sis. Gotta cut the dead weight sometimes." My eyes didn't flinch. "Where did you get the money for this setup?" He smirked. "You wouldn't believe how much people pay for old war stuff. Especially if you make it sound sentimental." Jolene chuckled lightly, as if we were at brunch. My fingers tightened around the box in my purse. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I took a breath and looked around the room, at the empty space where the photo used to hang, at the glowing lights of his mining rig, at my mother, who didn't seem to think anything was wrong with any of this. Colton had the nerve to turn back to his laptop like I was invisible. I walked past him slowly, my heels clicking against the hardwood. No one followed. No one stopped me. Back in my car, I sat in silence for a long time before starting the engine. The metal felt heavier now, not because of what it was, but because of how little it seemed to mean to the people who should have protected it too. They'd already decided what mattered, and it wasn't Dad, or me. If they wouldn't protect his memory, then I would. Even if it meant standing alone against everyone I once called family. Sleep didn't visit me that night, not even briefly. I lay still in the dim light of my bedroom, watching shadows from the street lamps shift across the ceiling like ghosts pacing an attic. The metal sat on my nightstand, untouched. I hadn't even put it back in its box. It lay there like a reminder. Or maybe a warning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Colton's smug face, his voice echoing like static. "Crypto's the future, sis." I saw the space on the hallway wall where Dad's photo had once hung, now replaced by some abstract art from a thrift store. And then I saw my mother's face, that practiced indifference she wore like makeup. Maybe she thought I'd forget. Maybe she wanted me to. But I hadn't, and I couldn't. Just before sunrise, I got up and walked to the little desk in the corner. The box the metal had been stolen from was still there, lid propped open. On impulse, I picked up the metal again, weighing it in my hand. Then something made me look closer. The velvet lining shifted just slightly under my thumb. I pressed down and felt something hidden beneath the fabric. Peeling it back, I found a piece of yellowed paper, folded tightly and worn at the creases. My heart began to race, not with fear, but recognition. That handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. If you found this, it means someone crossed a line. Protect what's yours. Check the blue toolbox. It wasn't just a note. It was a message, a directive, a warning wrapped in love. He knew. Somehow, he knew. I held the paper to my chest for a long moment, then folded it back carefully and placed it in the box. Later that morning, after a long shower and a cup of coffee I barely tasted, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, but something told me to answer. "Hello? Darlene, this is Ted Hendricks. I was in your dad's unit. Vietnam, 1970. I got your number from the VFW board." My breath caught. "I was thinking about him today," he continued, voice warm but weathered. "Wondered if you'd gotten the medal yet." I stood there, barefoot in my kitchen, holding the phone like it might burn. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. "Your father always said it would go to you. That it was never about the medal, it was about the meaning. Said if anyone ever tried to keep it from you, They were no family of his. I closed my eyes, fighting the lump rising in my throat. I have it now. I'm glad, he said. He'd want you to have it. He trusted you. After we hung up, I sat down at the table and let the silence settle again. But it didn't feel empty this time. It felt full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. An hour later, I drove to Mom's house, not to argue, not even to confront. I walked past her in the kitchen and straight into the garage. She called after me, but I didn't stop. The blue toolbox had been there for as long as I could remember. My dad's name was scratched into the lid with a pocket knife. Inside, everything was just how he left it. Organized chaos, each item in its own memory. I lifted the level, his favorite, and turned it over. Taped underneath, a second note. Truth lives in proof, not memory. Be ready. I stared at it, not blinking. He hadn't just left me keepsakes. He'd left instructions. Back home, I pulled out every folder, every document, every envelope he'd ever stored in the filing cabinet I had almost thrown away after he passed. Military records, discharge papers, letters from the VA, old tax filings. Some were benign, others weren't. One letter from 2019, addressed to Jolene, referenced a transfer of ownership for the house, but it didn't match up with the deed. A will amendment I'd never seen was marked final, but the signature was slightly off, slanted in a way that wasn't my father's. Something didn't add up. And it wasn't just sentiment now. It was legal. That night, I opened my laptop and started a digital folder, Dad's Legacy. I scanned the notes, the metal certificate, the odd letters. I flagged the inconsistencies and highlighted what didn't make sense. Because this wasn't just about a medal anymore. What if what they took wasn't just mine, but illegal? I wasn't just reclaiming a piece of metal. I was uncovering a cover-up. And I needed to know just how far it went. Sunday afternoon brought a quiet heat that made even the air feel accusatory. I pulled into DeMarco's parking lot and sat in my car for a minute, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching people come and go with things they no longer needed, tools, jewelry, dusty electronics. I was here for something that should have never been let go in the first place. Frank greeted me with a nod when I stepped inside. He didn't ask why I was back. I have the footage, he said, already walking toward the back office. In the cramped room behind the counter, he dimmed the lights and hit play. The grainy footage rolled, timestamp blinking in the corner. And there he was, Colton, confident, relaxed, dressed better than usual, like someone trying to impress a date or a loan officer. He set the box on the counter, leaned in, and pointed at the metal inside. I watched him sign the slip, his signature, bold, casual, like it was just another errand. He said it was his stepdad's, Frank murmured, pausing the footage, claimed no one else in the family wanted it. I didn't respond. My eyes were glued to the screen, but my mind was racing somewhere between disbelief and disgust. He hadn't hesitated. Not a twitch, not a glance back. He looked like someone who'd done it before. "Can I get a copy?" I asked. Frank nodded. "I figured you'd want one." Back in my car, I replayed the footage on my phone, watching Colton's every move like I was studying a stranger. Except he wasn't a stranger. He was the kid I'd helped with his science fair project in 7th grade, the teenager I once bailed out when he wrecked Mom's car and lied about it. The same man who had just pawned a piece of my father and acted like he was entitled to do it. Driving to Mom's house, I didn't feel angry. Not yet. It was something else. A hollow, growing knowledge that the people I'd spent years defending might not have ever been on my side. Dinner was already on the table when I arrived. Meatloaf, green beans, that oversweet cornbread Jolene swore by. The air smelled like cinnamon and tension. Nice of you to join us, Mom said, sliding a plate my way. Colton sat across from me, eyes down on his phone. His mining rig had apparently quieted down just enough for Sunday supper. I didn't eat. I waited until Mom was halfway through her first glass of wine. Did either of you think to ask me before pawning Dad's metal? The clink of a fork against a plate was the only sound for a few seconds. Jolene looked up slowly. Sweetheart, it's just a piece of metal. We thought it was better than letting it collect dust. I let out a short laugh, dry, disbelieving. Dust? You mean legacy? Colton finally looked up, smirking. You're acting like we burned the Constitution. That broke something in me, not loudly, not with yelling, but the quiet kind of break that shifts your whole balance. You didn't just sell a medal, I said, voice low but steady. You sold the only thing left that told me he existed. Jolene shifted in her seat, eyes darting between us, but she didn't apologize. She didn't deny it either. Colton shrugged. Then maybe it's time you stop living in the past. The air in the room thickened, not with heat or scent, but with every unsaid word, every silent betrayal. I stood, pushing the chair back slowly. No dramatics, no slammed doors. I'm done eating, I said. And I left, each footstep against the hardwood floor louder than any argument I could have started. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. They thought I would fume and fade away. But I'd just begun to gather my ammunition. It was just past 6 p.m. when my phone lit up with Colton's name. I stared at it for a moment, then pressed answer without saying a word. Hey, Dare, he started, tone casual, almost cheerful. You got a minute? I didn't respond. I figured we should clear the air, he continued. You know, before this all turns ugly, no reason for things to get complicated when we can find middle ground. I stayed silent. So here's the thing, he went on, undeterred. That startup's finally taking shape. Investors are circling, and if you stay out of the noise, let Mom and I handle it. I'd be happy to make sure you're included in the long run. I'm talking real profit. There was a beat. Then he added, it's not like Dad was ever a business genius. He wouldn't want us stuck in nostalgia. He'd want us moving forward. Still, I said nothing. I let the weight of silence stretch between us. All right, well, think about it, he said, voice thinning. No hard feelings. Click. No hard feelings. That's what people say when they've stabbed you in the back and are already walking away. Later that night, I checked my mailbox and found a stiff white envelope addressed not to me, but to the Ruth family. Inside was an invitation to the annual Veterans Hall Remembrance Banquet. It was printed on thick cardstock, the kind used for weddings or fundraisers, scrolled in elegant font, honoring the legacy of Arthur Ruth, represented by Jolene Bardot and Colton Avery. My name wasn't mentioned. I called the event coordinator the next morning. Oh, Miss Ruth, she said, flustered. I thought you'd moved. Your mother said she and her son would be representing the family. I ended the call before she could backpedal. They were trying to write me out in public now, not just from the house or the family dinners, but from history. The event was scheduled for Friday evening. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call to protest. I bought a black dress, printed out copies of the pawn receipt, the photo of Colton at DeMarco's, and Dad's note from the metal case. I made sure they were neat, not sensational, just facts. When Friday came, I walked into the banquet hall through the side door and stood quietly at the back. I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to see. Jolene wore navy blue with a pearl necklace that wasn't hers originally. Colton had on a suit too expensive for someone who didn't have a steady job last year. They smiled, shook hands, stood near a display with Dad's framed photo, one I had taken on his last 4th of July. A slideshow began. Images of my father in uniform, photos from boot camp, shots of him with his grandkids, who weren't Colton's, pictures I'd scanned for a scrapbook Mom once claimed she lost in the move. Not a single mention of me. I wasn't watching a tribute. I was watching branding, grief as PR, legacy as marketing. After the applause faded, I made my way to the stage's side panel and asked to speak to the event manager. "There's something you should know," I said softly, handing her a manila folder. "That medal you honored tonight, it was pawned. I recovered it myself. This is the receipt, and this is my father's handwriting confirming who it was meant for." Her eyes scanned the papers, then flicked up to meet mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. "I'm not here to ruin reputations," I added. "I'm here to restore one." I didn't stay for the cleanup or the awkward glances. I didn't wait to see if Colton or Jolene noticed I'd been there. I walked out with my head high, not because I'd won, but because I was done hiding. Back home, I pulled out more documents, scanned letters, labeled folders. The process wasn't fast, but it was intentional, controlled, clean. My father had left a breadcrumb trail. I was following it. Near midnight, I found a yellow sticky note tucked between pages of a 2002 tax return. In my father's slanted handwriting, it read, "Don't wait for them to do the right thing. Teach them what it looks like." I leaned back, let the words soak in, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just defending his memory anymore. I was building something with it. They wanted me invisible. I was about to become impossible to ignore. Ray Winslow's office didn't look like the kind of place where people plotted retaliation. It was quiet, no nonsense. Like her, files stacked neatly, coffee half-finished, windows shut tight against the Texas humidity. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She flipped open the manila folder I'd brought, her brow furrowing with precision as she scanned the papers. "This is the most recent version of the will?" she asked. "Yes. Dated late 2017. He gave it to me months before he passed, told me where he kept the original, had me make copies, said he didn't want things getting messy." I kept my voice calm, even though my stomach twisted just hearing myself explain it. Ray nodded, already reaching for a thick binder. "There's no legal record of any amendment since then, no transfer of personal items, no handoff of power of attorney. That medal, along with anything listed here, was yours, legally." She leaned forward, fingers clasped. "If it was pawned without your consent and the person claimed ownership, that's fraud. If they submitted a forged transfer of title, it becomes criminal." I took a long breath. "And if they built a business using his name, image, and personal materials? That's misappropriation of legacy and potentially unlawful conversion of estate assets," Ray said without blinking. "You'd have standing." I didn't need to ask if she'd take the case. Her tone already said she was 3 steps ahead. Back at my mother's house that evening, I didn't knock. I walked in like I used to, before everything twisted, before the silence between us was thicker than blood. Jolene sat at the dining table, sipping tea from the cup I bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, the one she never used unless company was over. I dropped a copy of the will onto the table. The paper made a sharp slap against the wood. She didn't look up. "Paperwork doesn't measure legacy, Darlene." "Vision does." "You mean the kind where you erase the only person he trusted?" Before she could respond, Colton strolled in, holding a stack of flyers and his phone. He dropped both onto the counter like a magician revealing a trick. "We've got the pitch event tomorrow night," he announced. "We're calling it Project Honor Chain. Pretty catchy, right? I picked up one of the flyers. My father's face was front and center, smiling in uniform. His name printed in bold. Below it, their company tagline, "Modern values built on timeless honor." I clenched the paper. "You're using him as branding." Colton raised an eyebrow. "The world needs heroes. Why not package one?" My voice stayed steady, cold. "Because he was my father, not your marketing mascot." He laughed softly, like I'd just told a joke he didn't get but pretended to. "It's business, Dar. You can't cling to the past forever." "No," I said. "But I can make sure you don't profit off of it." I left before they could say another word, the flyer still crushed in my hand. The next morning, I returned to Ray's office with a USB drive and a stack of documents, photos of the medal, screenshots of Colton at the pawn shop, copies of emails between him and the event organizers, a copy of Dad's handwritten note, my voice recorded late the night before, recounting the theft in full detail. Ray reviewed everything, her face unreadable. Then she looked up. "We'll file under misrepresentation and asset conversion. There's a case here, stronger than most." I hesitated only a second before saying, "Do it. I'm done asking for decency." Later that night, unable to sleep, I pulled up the startup's website. Their homepage was live, sleek, clean, glossy photos of Colton shaking hands with men in suits. A video banner auto-played at the top, muted by default, but I didn't need the sound. I recognized the footage. They were using Dad's voice from an old home video I shot on a family road trip. He was talking about serving his country, about building a life worth protecting. They'd stripped the context, edited it clean, paired it with a montage of stock war clips and digital code flowing across the screen. I felt my jaw tighten. It wasn't just a medal anymore. They had taken his words, his image, his story, turned them into currency. They didn't just cross a line, they tore through it. If they wanted to turn my father's memory into a brand, they were about to meet the woman holding the trademark. By Thursday evening, the air in San Antonio had thickened with summer heat and something sharper, inevitability. I sat on my couch, fan spinning overhead, laptop open on the coffee table when the email came in. Subject line, RE Presentation Agenda, remove Darlene's slide. The message had been forwarded accidentally by a paralegal in Ray's office who had been monitoring communications tied to the Honor Chain event. Inside, there it was, plain as a slap to the face. "She won't be involved. Let's not complicate this. Focus on the narrative we control." Jolene had sent it. Colton was CC'd, along with a PR firm I didn't recognize. I read it 3 times. Then I didn't blink for nearly a minute. They weren't just trying to minimize me. They wanted to erase me. I forwarded the email to Ray, then leaned back, eyes closed. This was no longer about family dynamics. This was reputation warfare. And if they were going to play corporate, so was I. The next morning, I met Ray at her office again. She slid a document across the desk, a 2019 transfer form claiming my father had passed ownership of symbolic family property to Colton. "This was notarized," Ray said, tapping the corner. "But here's the issue. Your father was in the VA hospice that week, and the notary? She was in El Paso. He never left San Antonio." I didn't respond right away. The rage was too quiet, too cold. "So it's forged," I said. She nodded. "And with malicious intent, it could trigger criminal charges, not just civil." I set my palms on the table. "Then we prove it." Later that day, I sat at my kitchen table, lights dimmed, a cold glass of water untouched by my hand. I drafted an open letter to the board of the Veterans Foundation, which Colton's startup was proudly partnered with. I attached screenshots of the pawn receipt, a still from the pawn shop's footage, the message my father had hidden beneath the medal's velvet, I ended it with one line. You are funding a fraud. I suggest you investigate who is profiting off the back of a dead soldier. I CC'd Ray and hit send. It was only an hour later that Jolene showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She pounded. I opened it without saying a word. She stood there with the printed letter in hand, face flushed, eyes sharp. You just love making this about you, don't you? I leaned on the doorframe. No, I'm finally making it not about you. She took a breath, composed herself. You're going to break this family. No, I said evenly. You already did. I'm just not covering it up anymore. She blinked, lips parted like she had a rebuttal, but nothing came. I waited. Silence did the rest. She walked off. No apology, just the soft clack of her heels on the driveway. That night, I stayed up organizing every document I had. I created backups on 3 cloud drives, put flash drives in separate drawers, and labeled folders the way Dad used to, clearly, redundantly, securely. I printed copies, made 2 binders, one for Ray, one for me. Then I opened a new envelope and labeled it. Plan B. Whatever they had coming, they wouldn't be able to say they didn't deserve it. They were building a brand off my father's honor. I was about to burn their foundation down. I woke before sunrise, not because of an alarm, but because the silence in the room had weight. My body moved on its own. Clothes laid out the night before, a black folder zipped tight with every piece of truth I'd gathered over the past month. A flash drive in my purse, copies on the cloud, and printed evidence in triplicate. I didn't wear makeup, didn't curl my hair. I dressed like someone heading into court, not an investor gala. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to restore what they tried to erase. By late morning, the venue was buzzing, literally and figuratively. A rented hotel ballroom off Loop 410, polished to a sheen with rented confidence and bad catering. The backdrop behind the stage glowed blue with the words "Honor Chain" stretched wide across it. The promo banners had Colton's face on one side and Dad's on the other. My breath caught when I saw the Veterans Memorial display near the entrance. Rows of photos of fallen soldiers with a polished brass plaque listing families who carried the torch. My name wasn't there. Jolene's was, so was Colton's. A volunteer in a red blazer noticed me reading the plaque and leaned in. We were told only Mr. Avery is representing the family now. Is that not correct? I smiled without warmth. No, ma'am, that's not correct at all. I stayed at the edge of the room, didn't sit, just watched. Colton took the stage like a tech messiah, complete with headset mic and perfectly rehearsed charm. Today, he said, we honor a legacy, not just my father's service, but his spirit of innovation. Honor Chain is more than a platform. It's a bridge between patriotism and the blockchain. Slides clicked behind him. Dad's face, war photos cropped to fit the narrative, quotes I never heard him say. Inspired by my father's courage, Colton went on, we created a tool that preserves valor forever. I waited. Waited until the screen flashed video, a clip I knew too well. Dad in our backyard, talking to me about his deployment. His words were spliced, edited to sound like he was endorsing this nonsense. That was my cue. I walked calmly down the side aisle. I nodded at the AV tech near the stage. He'd been briefed by Ray the night before. I handed him a USB. Now, I whispered. The screen flickered, the mic cut, then a new video played. Dad, sitting at our old kitchen table, in his flannel, hair thin, voice raspy but steady. If you're watching this, it means someone tried to take what was never theirs, my medal, my story. They belong to my daughter. She's the one who stood beside me when it mattered. Not for show, for love. Gasps echoed across the room. Colton froze mid-step. Jolene went pale in the front row. Whispers turned to murmurs. I could see phones rising, recording. By the time the video ended, the Veterans Board quietly began removing their booth signage. The air in the room had shifted. Whatever spell they cast was broken. I didn't gloat, didn't raise my voice. I walked up to Colton and handed him a sealed envelope. He looked at it like it might explode. "Cease and desist," I said. "Effective immediately. Pull every video, every page, every use of his name." Jolene stepped forward, voice low. "You really had to do this in front of everyone?" I turned to her. "You used his face to sell a fantasy. I used his voice to bring him back." And for once, she had nothing to say. I left as the audience scattered, vendors packed up, and silence replaced applause. For the first time, they didn't speak. And for the first time, I didn't need them to. By Saturday morning, the headlines had spread like wildfire. Blogs, local news, even niche finance forums had one version or another. Veteran's daughter exposes fraud behind patriotic startup. And then the sharper ones, crypto legacy built on a lie. I sat at my dining table, coffee cold, watching clip after clip of Colton's pitch unravel. The video of Dad's confession had made its way online. Someone at the event must have recorded it from the crowd. I watched Colton walk off stage, his face stunned, not even trying to hide it. He had always chased applause like oxygen. Now he was choking on silence. By midday, the Veterans Foundation had scrubbed all mentions of Honor Chain from their platforms. Their statement was brief. "We take questions of integrity seriously. Effective immediately, our affiliation with Honor Chain has been suspended pending further review." I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. That evening, I drove to the hospice where my father had spent his final days. The same sterile hallway, the same scent of antiseptic, and something too clean to be comforting. "Hi," I said to the nurse at the desk, introducing myself. "I'm Darlene Ruth. My father passed here 3 years ago, Arthur Ruth." The nurse blinked, then nodded with recognition. "Yes, I remember him, quiet man, always made sure to say thank you, even when he could barely speak." I swallowed. "Can I ask, was my mother here often? Toward the end?" She hesitated, then guided me to a bench in the hallway. "She came by regularly," the nurse said. "But there was one visit, just before he passed. She had a notary with her, said she needed him to sign some final paperwork." My hands clenched. "And did he?" The nurse's eyes softened. "He was in and out, barely lucid, honestly. He might have signed anything you put in front of him." But that wasn't consent, not in the way it should have been. I thanked her and left. The rage that welled up inside me wasn't loud. It didn't boil. It sat there, heavy, like sediment. The next day, Ray called. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. She'd uncovered bank statements, transfers made months before the pitch. Colton hadn't funded Honor Chain alone. Jolene had pulled from the family trust. Money Dad had earmarked for grandkids, scholarships, long-term care. She wired it directly into Colton's startup account, Ray explained, and she listed it as an investment in future legacy alignment. She wasn't just protecting him, I said. She was profiting from him. Ray's voice was careful. "This isn't just financial, it's breach of trust. If you want to pursue charges—" I cut her off gently. "Not yet." Instead, I asked her to file a public motion, a court-ordered review of the trust transfer, not behind closed doors, in front of anyone willing to watch. That Sunday morning, Jolene was served in front of her church group. I didn't go, but a friend sent me a photo, her face frozen mid-sentence, envelope in hand. I didn't need revenge, I told Ray later. I needed witnesses. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. The air was thick with summer, the kind of heat that makes the silence feel alive. I kneeled at Dad's grave and placed the medal, polished, whole, back at the base of his headstone. "They tried to make your memory a transaction," I whispered, "but I kept the receipt." I sat there for a long time, not crying, not praying, just breathing. I wasn't broken, not anymore, just deeply changed. I didn't win. I remembered, that was enough. They were losing everything they built on lies, and I was finally building something of my own. By Monday morning, the story had spilled far beyond my control. I didn't have to forward the video clip anymore. It had gone viral on its own. TikTok, Facebook, local news sites. Even one of the national morning shows ran a 30-second teaser under the headline, "Crypto Startup Accused of Exploiting Veterans' Memory." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just watched the videos play on loop from my kitchen counter. My father's voice, his real voice, cut through each one like a knife through soft cloth. I didn't share it. I didn't repost or like or comment. Let them explain it to the world now. By noon, a friend messaged me a screenshot. Colton's office was shuttered. A sign taped to the door said, "Relocating." That was code for gone. Investors pulled out overnight, I was told. His project's online presence collapsed in a matter of hours. The once hyped Honor Chain website now led to a 404-page. But the worst part? A vendor emailed me anonymously. Said Colton placed a bulk order, over $7,000 worth of crypto mining hardware, the morning of Dad's funeral. While I was at the cemetery alone, giving a eulogy, no one else stayed long enough to hear. Colton had been finalizing a shipment. He didn't bury a man. He bought a motherboard. Ray called Tuesday. Her voice was calm, precise. "We've located the original documents," she said. "Your father's last notarized trust assignments, dated, stamped, matching every signature he ever used in military service." My breath hitched. "So the copies Jolene submitted..." "Fabricated," Ray confirmed. "They modified older documents and slipped them through during hospice. But we have the originals now. They're admissible." I whispered, "No matter how many copies they made, the original never lied." By Wednesday morning, we stood in court. Jolene had aged 10 years since I last saw her. Gone was the stiff hair, the perfect posture. She looked tired, small. The judge reviewed the petition and documentation for 20 minutes in silence. Ray stood tall, steady, while I kept my hands folded in my lap. When asked if she had anything to say, Jolene only said, "I'd like to settle out of court." The judge raised a brow. "You're requesting to avoid litigation?" She nodded. "I just want this over." I didn't oppose it, but I had one condition. "She signs over full control of the estate," I told Ray, who relayed it with no hesitation. "Every remaining asset, family record, and name right, all of it." Jolene's lawyer muttered something under his breath, but she paused, then nodded slowly. "You want to be in charge of the memories too?" she said to me directly, bitter and flat. I met her gaze without blinking. "I already was. You just sold the frame." Outside the courtroom, Ray handed me a thick folder. Final documents. Deed transfers. Asset freezes. Property reconfirmed in my name. It felt weightless in my hand and heavy in my chest. I exhaled. "Thank you," I said, voice firm but quiet. "I didn't want to ruin them." Ray smiled just slightly. "You didn't. They did that themselves. You just stopped letting them rewrite you." I walked to my car alone, past reporters who barely recognized me. I didn't stop, didn't answer questions. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to finish what Dad started the moment he wrote my name on that medal's backplate. I didn't just reclaim the medal. I reclaimed my place in a story they tried to erase. Friday evening was quiet in the way only something final can be, the kind of quiet that doesn't invite reflection, just acceptance. I just returned home from Ray's office, carrying with me the stamped settlement papers when I heard a knock at the door. Not frantic, not hesitant, just tired. I opened it to find Colton standing there, holding a worn folder, looking like a man who had aged decades in weeks. His shirt was wrinkled, shoes dusty, confidence nowhere in sight. "Hey," he said, voice low, "can I talk to you?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let him in. He walked in slowly, like the air had turned heavier just for him. He set the folder on my kitchen table and opened it, revealing real estate forms, zoning reports, transfer agreements. "It's all gone," he muttered. "The money, the site, the name, everything. I just need something to get me through the next few months. A bridge, you know?" He tapped the paperwork. "If you sign this, we can sell Dad's house. It's not being used anyway." I picked up the first page, scanned it without emotion, then closed the folder slowly and handed it back. "This was never yours to sell," I said. "Not emotionally, not legally." Colton didn't argue, just stood there, eyes down. "People always said you were the smart one," he said. "Guess I should have listened." I tilted my head slightly. "No, you should have respected what wasn't yours." He didn't reply. He left with the folder still in his hand and a silence that followed him out like a shadow. After he left, I sat alone at the table for a long time. That moment, his surrender, should have felt like victory, but all I felt was done. I walked to the back room where I kept old family boxes. Photos, letters, old keepsakes. I hadn't touched them in years, not because they hurt, but because they reminded me how much we used to pretend things were whole. There was a photo album with curling edges, one Dad had filled with Polaroids from when I was a kid. Another box held my third-grade report card, where he'd scribbled "so proud" in pen beside my B+ in science. I kept those. I left the plaques from community dinners, the participation trophies Jolene insisted we display, the framed magazine clipping that called Colton a rising local innovator. They didn't mean anything anymore. I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking away lighter. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Jolene's name lit the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "I just want to talk," she began. "I know things got out of hand, but we're still family, Darlene. We can rebuild what's left." I let her speak. She danced around any apology, never once using the word sorry. When she finally stopped, I said, "This family ended when you decided I was disposable." And then, without another word, I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone. Didn't cry. I set it down and reached for a pen. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Jolene, not to Colton, but to my father. "Dad," it began, "they took the medal, but they couldn't take the moment you gave it to me." I told him about the pitch event, the courtroom, Ray, the silence that followed every truth I finally spoke out loud. "You taught me that honor isn't a speech, it's a choice." When I was done, I folded the letter and placed it inside the metal box, beneath the velvet. Then I closed the lid. Some things aren't meant to be passed down, just remembered. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread what came next. I designed it. It was just past 9 a.m. when the final signature hit the dotted line. The house, my father's house, was no longer ours, and by ours, I mean theirs. Colton hadn't lived in it a day in his life. Jolene hadn't walked through it since the estate hearing, but both had clung to it like their last symbol of authority. I didn't tell them about the buyer, didn't tell them the proceeds would fund a new scholarship for children of Texas veterans. And I didn't stay for their predictable calls once the sale hit the public record. A week later, a retired Marine and his wife moved in, shaking my hand with eyes that didn't dart away when I mentioned who built the place. They tried to build a monument with his name, I whispered after they'd gone inside. I built opportunity with his values. That afternoon, I headed to the courthouse one last time. I wasn't summoned. I wasn't required to be there. But I knew Colton would be, handling the remaining filings from his collapsed LLC. He waited near the entrance, tapping a pen against his folder. His suit hung loose on him now. He looked up when I approached, eyes searching for something soft. I didn't offer it. I lost everything, he muttered, almost embarrassed to admit it aloud. Thought maybe you'd want to talk. Talk? I smiled without warmth. That's what you did while you took— I'm done listening. I reached into my bag and handed him a photo. Dad in uniform, the medal pinned to his chest, pride in his eyes. Not for Colton to keep, just for him to remember what he lost. He opened his mouth, closed it, and nodded. That was the first and last honest thing he did all year. Later that evening, I met Ray at a local diner. She slid her phone across the table with the latest headline from the Tribune. Veterans Foundation clears name of decorated soldier after legacy misused. Below the fold was Jolene's name, tied to her quiet resignation from the local community board. The statement she'd issued was dry, full of legal polish, and devoid of anything resembling remorse. I laughed quietly, pushing the phone back toward Ray. Funny how some people still can't say sorry even when they've run out of words. Ray sipped her coffee. She's the kind who thinks silence can't be quoted. We didn't toast. We didn't linger. I paid the bill and left with my name and my father's restored. The following Monday, I moved into a small cottage one town over, white shutters, a porch swing, enough space for quiet. The kind of place you don't just live in, but return to. I teach part-time now. American history. No one in my class knows what I went through. They just know I don't tolerate historical revision. In the afternoons, I volunteer at the VFW hall, help coordinate events, write the newsletters. Every Tuesday, I host a small writing circle. Veterans, widows, former medics, people with stories they weren't sure anyone still wanted to hear. The medal sits on a shelf beside my desk. No case, no spotlight. Just resting next to a framed quote that reads, "Honor isn't inherited, it's protected." A month after the dust settled, a young journalist emailed me for an interview. Said she was working on a podcast about legacy theft, and someone from the board gave her my name. She asked if we could talk. I said yes. We met in a park, mic clipped to my collar. I didn't prep or rehearse. Not all legacy thefts are financial, I said into the recorder. Some are emotional, some are spiritual. Sometimes they try to rewrite the story while you're still living in it. She asked what I'd tell others going through something similar. I answered without pause. If someone ever tries to erase you, don't shout. Speak louder with what you do, not what they say. Her eyes widened a little. I knew that look. It was the one I wore the day I stopped being afraid of losing what they thought was mine. That night, I came home, lit a candle, and opened the metal box one more time. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I just smiled, closed it, and placed it back in its spot. They thought they could write me out, but I didn't need their chapter. I wrote my own.